pleasure to be here. I'm grateful to be here. Today, virtue collapsed on my head. I was walking downtown, and on the sidewalk with the concrete, and I was truly blessed to walk underneath this architecture. And it was beautiful. I could tell it was the work of an artist like me. This dedication to detail. The crossing of the T's and the dotting of the I's. The dotting of the I's. And the virtue just fell from the sky. Because in that moment when I looked up at this architecture, this marvelous wonder of the Michelangelo, not Michelangelo, but reminded me of Michelangelo. The Sistine Chapel. The sky was like the Sistine Chapel in this piece of architecture. So glorious. And I felt the kinship. I can see it now. My soulmate right there stretched across the sky. Manufactured by the hands of a really sensitive person who would never be the cause of effrontery if you were to meet him. He would address you with total, consummate respect, esteem, value your character. This person wore virtue. I'm certain of it, like a suit. You know, the kind of art that makes you change your life. That follows you wherever you go. And you want to explain it to people. These arches, these red arches, crisscrossing each other. And I'm like, after a while, it's totally oppressive, you know? Because magnificence can be that way. You feel the full ballast of meaning impressing itself upon you, crushing you with significance. Sometimes things are so great you don't even think you could ever get lost again. Because that great thing is like always with you. And it's always helping you. Like a voice in the back of your head. Once you see something of such inestimable quality, life is never the same, ever. And then all the things that suck ass. Suck ass even more. Because now you got a frame of comparison. I'm not the only one. Of course, I'm not the only one. I saw so many people affected at least 20 people affected, because this architecture goes up and comes down. It's like that great arch in St. Louis, but there's like, 26 of them, and they're all going up and coming down at different places, and they're all intertwined, and they're not literal arches, but they're just like spaghettis all through the sky. And then they start to move, and then when they touch each other, some kind of realignment happens, and that becomes the epicenter of power for the arrangement, which then moves the base. So two spaghettis come together, red spaghettis hit, and the force, or the concussion of their nexus, reverberates throughout the spaghetti and changes the actual anchorage. And so it's like this. And it's like at those museums when you were a kid and there was the sphere and the electricity comes out. It's like that Tesla thing. That's what the architecture was. But it wasn't electricity. There was none of that electromagnetic stuff happening. It was the virtue of the people. Virtue of the people who walked into the installation. Can you imagine that? Now, it's probably best to imagine it as an efflux of electromagnetic energy, a geyser. Probably best to see it that way. A geyser coming out of the chest. So, if you had one person who was full of virtue, a real virtuous person, like the architect himself, but another person, because only the architect who was that virtuous could create architecture that relied upon virtue for its existence, because the spaghetti was made of virtue. The spaghetti, virtue. That's why I'm so intrigued by this modern art installation, because it didn't exist until you walked into the precincts of the spaghetti. And Michelangelo being Italian. So you walk there, and you're just ho-humming about like this. Ho-hum, 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 tweedly-dum. And the spaghetti comes, but you're like, where did it come from? That's what I didn't understand at first, and it was so exciting. I was like, I'm being surrounded by electromagnetic spaghetti, but it's not really that. It's just, those are the best words. And what I came to understand is that I could never see the provenance of the spaghetti virtue. I couldn't see the origin point. Wherever I looked, it eluded me until someone else walked into it. Walked into the space that I occupied. And I saw what happened. The virtue shot out the back and spaghettied upward into these tentacles and these strings that interacted. The people composed the artwork in real time using their virtue. And we're going to be really clear here, because I'm somewhat virtuous. I'm going to try to be clear here. There were some people, curmudgeons, let's call them, who would walk near me, and just little spaghetti comes out of their back, just like little spaghetti bowls, like you'd get at a fast food spaghetti shop. Not something that you would get at a premier Italian joint in the city, but like Olive Garden, just coming out of the back. And I'm like, you try not to judge, because right when you judge someone for something like that, your own spaghetti starts to diminish. And the art that you're creating in that part of town ain't so great. And then someone else comes up to you and is like, your art sucks. It's like that. But what I decided to do was to befriend the people and support them. Because I thought, hey, if we can all do this together, we can create better art together. And so I stood in the center, and it was like this. It would come out like the wings of an archangel. All these spaghetti filaments would erupt from my back and encircle me and everyone, and then crisscross in such exquisite machinations. Oh my God, an ethereal shenanigans of virtue playing with itself. God, it was unbelievably delicious, decadent, and just a luxury, and it's just my own kind of psycho-spiritual affluence was cascading throughout the sky. It was so high, and in love. In love. What I was in that part of town, with these people walking around me and just remarking upon my display like a peacock, a metaphysical peacock. That's who I was. So awesome. I could only feel that way in that part of town. It's like Coney Island when you're 9. Cotton candy and a big Ferris wheel and the dock that goes out. I wish I knew who that architect was. Who could do that? Who could create such an orchestration so that when I entered it, my virtue became clear, and the virtue of others, and then we had a choice. Were we going to accentuate our virtuous selves, augment our virtue by collaborating with one another, supporting one another, go team? Or we were going to be self-centered and merely self-referential and insular in our display, covetous of our own beauty to the exclusion of the aesthetic around us. You get selfish sometimes, and you think, I want this, but for me, not for you, and not for you. I want this for me. But then you see the spaghetti is just kind of lousy, right? And you look over, and you see someone else suffering the same delusion. They're only concerned about their own spaghetti, and that diminishes their virtue. So you collaborate, and you get more people in on the game. Except after a while, it's not a game. It starts off as something very exotic. Wow. You can't believe your eyes at first. And, it's like entertainment. But stay there for several hours on end. And your previous life, your former life, your real life is nothing now. It's like, as I used to say after James Cameron's Avatar came out, that billion-dollar blockbuster was more real than most people's lives. And so they just see it over and over and over again. And they would just want to be part of the Na'vi. They would imagine themselves as 12 feet tall blue people. who had long hair that could connect to the mane of a horse and control the horse, or some pterodactyl, or the equivalent. But that was then and this is now. And I've got to tell you, I don't want to leave this installation. I don't want to go and talk to people anymore. I just want to create virtue with them. And yes, I've thought about that. I've thought about it. Can there be virtue in such a self-isolated terrarium of spaghetti? Don't you have to leave and be challenged to acquire virtue? To be virtuous, don't you have to have resistance? Can we just be virtuous without any sort of pushback from reality? Isn't a virtue created by how the metal of our character is tested? Or can I just be me and walk in this precious space and create this artwork? After a while, the questions bog you down. Too many questions, too little virtue. That's the problem with today's people. So educated, but they don't even believe in virtue anymore. Virtue, like everything else to the educated, is a form of oppression. So there I was, questioning this art, questioning Sir Michelangelo, and the fun just started to drip through my fingers. Gone, gone, gone. I had to destroy it with my education, because that's what education is good for. Yeah, ask anybody today who's been educated at college whether such a thing as virtue exists, and whether you could walk into an art installation and have virtue stream out of your being like enfolding angelic wings of spaghetti, and then interlaced throughout the sky in so many chimerical combinations with other people, so that you're creating this exquisite reality through your character. No. Who even talks about character? There's no more character. And so I could only enjoy that art piece for a limited time only. The expiration date was set by my mind, and the expiration date in my mind was created by my education. And so, after many, many experiences, I was forced to call it quits, not because I wanted to, because I no longer believed that I could just generate meaning from the abundance of my being. Meaning. It's so seductive to actually think that. But then you start to look at it objectively, with a caustic eye, an acrimonious eye. And you're like, oh, I don't believe in you. Because I don't believe in anything. I only believe in disbelief. It's such a sad state of affairs. You look up at the Sistine Chapel and you denigrate it. You deconstruct it. It can't be anything of value, because there's no virtue in the world, which means everything of magnificence is a shadow of our aspiration.